Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 2 Episode 4 Among the Lotus Eaters. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. So I have to start with a spoiler warning for Strange New Worlds up to Season 2 Episode 4. If you haven't seen up to this point, you will not want to watch this video, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. So before I jump into my review of Episode 4, Among the Lotus Eaters, I want to actually address last week's episode, Tomorrow. Because if you saw my review for that, I was in a hurry. I did that early in the morning. I was very groggy, and I didn't really have time to think about the episode or consider it. And I said I think it may be my least favorite episode of the entire show, and I gave it a 4 out of 10. But I wasn't sure because I didn't have that much time to think about it, and I hadn't read any other or watched any other reviews. So after I watched the reviews, I've seen a lot of positive reviews. A lot of people saying it was clearly the best episode of the season. A lot of people comparing it to episodes like City on the Edge of Forever and Yesterday's Enterprise, whereas I compared it to the Voyager two-parter Future's End and Picard Season 2. So obviously my opinions of it were a lot lower than everyone else's, or most other people's, I should say. In fact, the only other negative reviews I could find were those Strange New World haters who hate everything the show does, which I don't understand those people, and I don't want to be compared to them. So I had to think about this more, and the thing is, I really wanted to like this episode. It's not like I thought all these other people were wrong, or how could they like such a shitty episode. It was more like I'm envious of them, and I want to like the episode as much as they do. So I had to re-examine my position, and I'm like, am I being too harsh on this episode? Is it actually better than I think it is? And ultimately, I'm going to raise my rating from a 4 to a 6, because I do think I was being a little bit too harsh on it. I think that it was better than I thought. I think the character stories, I did talk about the character story between Kirk and Leon being my favorite, but I don't think I was giving it enough credit, and I actually thought the character story for Leon was really good. However, I'm still going to say it's my least favorite episode of the season so far. I don't know about the show overall. I'm going to change that opinion and say it's kind of a tie between the episode 6 of season 1, the one with, the society that was going to kill this kid in order to make everyone prosper. I think that was mishandled. And of course the episode 9 of season 1, which was the aliens ripoff with the Gorn babies. I think would be on par with those, although for this I wouldn't say it's the same thing, because I wanted to like this episode, but there were too many things about it I think failed or didn't work, such as the character who was like into aliens who turned out to be a Romulan. I never bought her. I didn't buy the scene when the police showed up and she made them go away whenever she started talking. It reminded me a lot of Rain Robinson from Future's End, and as a goofy, sloppily written character in the reveal that she was a Romulan, I don't think was done very well. And I also still believe that the plot was done very too fast. It didn't lead up to wasn't led up to like other classic episodes like Sitting on the Edge of Forever and Yesterday's Enterprise, where I thought the time travel gimmick was earned and explained and done very well, where here it just felt like some nonsense happened so the plot could happen, and I don't feel like it was developed or explained as well as those classic episodes. And also, I don't really like the fact that they keep going back to the Conwell, that they revealed the Ann's backstory of her last name, how she's ashamed of it. I think is a huge plot hole. That why didn't her family ever just change her name? And even if they come up with an excuse for this, for me it's just going to be a lame excuse, because that's a huge issue, and plus I'm just sick of them talking about Khan and bringing Khan up. So I do acknowledge it was better than I originally thought it was, but I'm still gonna stick with my. I'm still gonna say it's a 6, and I'm envious of the people who love this episode and think it's great, but I just can't. Anyway, with that all the way, wrapping up last week's garbage, let's get into this week's episode, which is Among the Lotus Eaters. This was an interesting concept as it revisited just a line of dialogue from the cage. Or not a line of dialogue, there was actually a scene. At the start of the cage, Pike was talking to the doctor about how, the whole actually character story of the cage was started because Pike was having a crisis of faith because he wanted to leave Starfleet after the incident that just happened on Rigel 7 where he lost 3 crew members, and he even says in that scene, I should have smelled it, I should have known when something was better, I should have known something was off, I should have been more prepared, and so he blames himself for those 3 characters' deaths. So this was like a major actually character story plot point of the cage, and then of course when he is actually in the cage with the Telosians and throwing all these illusions at him, we do see an illusion. They show him an illusion of Rigel 7 and what it looks like with the neat little castle and the brute or whatever who tries to kill him, and so we get a revisit to that, which is I don't necessarily need that, because it was just a scene, a line of dialogue, and it seems like they're trying to tie into the original series more. But I actually like what they did with it. I like the explanation of why, getting into deeper of how fucked up this world is, and why that is, and that it's asteroid that collided with it or whatever that's causing this radiation. So it's causing massive migraines and tinnitus that causes people to lose their memory unless they're living in this palace, which is why there's a huge palace, or if they have those helmets on, which is why they have those funky helmets on. So I think that was interesting. Now, they first go there because they see evidence that the Starfleet emblem, so they realize that they contaminated the culture in their brief visit, and they said they need to go back and correct this. But they found out that one of the people, now this is what's really interesting to me, one of the people that Pike was beating himself up on and so upset about that he died, did not in fact die and was still alive, and so he became like this emperor or whatever, and he was kind of, to be fair, he was kind of messed up by the radiation or whatever, and by the fact he was left behind, and after years of being left behind, he had some resentment towards Pike, and so when the shuttlecraft came, he knew immediately that it was Pike and the crew, so he was really pissed off, and put them in a cage, put them in a cage outside where they wouldn't be protected from the memory loss, and they would lose their memory, and sort of as revenge and having them suffer. And of course, he was spreading Starfleet technology around, which is, I suppose, how he became this huge, king or whatever. And then we also had the plot with Ortegas, which I think this was a very interesting character story for Ortegas. I think she definitely needs to be explored more in the future, but I thought this was nice how she was really excited to go on the away mission. She talked in her log about how excited she was, she loves flying the Enterprise, but she really wants to get out and do something else and really wants to explore, and she was all dressed up and ready to go. But then Spock comes with this information that apparently the space they're going to be in is very, very hazardous for the Enterprise. They need an expert pilot in there to account to move, keep the ship out of danger, and so she's stuck on the Enterprise, and she's very upset about this. But then it leads to later when the Enterprise actually gets affected by the same phenomenon where everyone starts losing their memory and everything. And then we focused on Ortegas as she is the one who can fly the ship, which is completely endangered. Now Spock, after learning that the Enterprise is in this, that the dangerous radiation or whatever is affecting. They're not exactly sure what it is that's affecting the crew to lose their memory, but they think it's the radiation. So they suggest taking the ship away from the planet, but number one doesn't want to because doesn't want to leave Pike and the crew behind. So Spock thinks, if we go in this debris field, maybe we'll get away from the radiation and we'll still be close to the planet. But in fact, they find that the debris field is the source of this radiation that's causing them, so things get even worse and everyone instantly loses their memory. And then I like the really cool scene with Ortegas as she's reminding herself who she is and I fly the ship. And it's kind of a good character story for her too, because at first she's like, I'm just a pilot, I just fly the ship, I want to be more. But here they find that she's the one person who can save the ship. And I love the scene we get with her while she's talking to the computer, because she has no idea who she is or where she is or what's going on, and the computer's informing her she's the pilot, and she could, I'm Erica Ortegas, I fly the ship. Now, first of all, this is something that goes back to Voyager. I kind of take issue with referring to piloting a starship as flying, because flying is like an aircraft in atmosphere. They're actually in space where there's no atmosphere. It isn't actually flying, but that's splitting hairs, and that's neither here nor there anyway. I did think that was a cool scene of her saying, I'd fly the ship, and her going back and actually doing it. And I love how this memory loss is portrayed as they don't remember specifics, but they remember emotion. And Spock keeps saying we should not operate by emotion, but that's actually when they lost their memory, all they have to go on. And I like how Ortegas, after she loses her memory, her first instinct is to be mad at Spock. She's like, well, why am I mad at you? And it's because Spock ordered them into that debris field, so it's actually his fault. And I love how they retain like that slight bit of instinct or memory. But anyway, getting back to the story, the planet, Pike storyline on the planet, they meet this guy who is another worker who tries to walk them through the forgetting, as they call it, and say it's just normal everyday experience, and the guards are being dicks, but he tries to, ease them into it because of the clothes they're wearing. He assumes they're mine workers like he is, but then, Pike starts to realize that something's off, that he's doesn't actually fit into this world, and then we meet the guy, and there's an uprising where Leon is injured, and of course they don't know who they are, but they instinctively, again, that emotional instinct motion comes up where they realize that they're friends with Omega, and it's like, I know that guy, so they can remember key things like that, which is really interesting. And then you get the friend they make, his backstory about how he can still feel the regret of loss, so he knows that he lost someone, but he doesn't want to remember who it is. And there's this totem or whatever that shows the history, and so there's a legend about there being a box of memories inside the palace, and then so they go to storm the palace, have fun storming the castle. Anyway, they go to storm the palace to retrieve this box of memories, and the yeoman guy who's left behind is laughing in Pike's face, and this is pretty interesting, this confrontation as well, because the yeoman guy was like Zach or whatever. He was like, he thought, he was like, it just figures that you would lead a revolution. Because Pike, even though he doesn't remember who he is, has no idea, he still manages to lead a revolution to get back. And he taunts him for, actually believing the myth of the box of memories, but it is, even it's metaphorically true, if not literally true, because the palace apparently does protect them from the memory loss being within the palace, and so with the longer they're within them, their memories will come back. And the box, there is a box of Starfleet material, including a medkit, which they need in order to save Leon's life. Now, I think the stakes were really, really high in this episode. and I was really invested in the stakes, like how they're gonna possibly get out of this one. And it was really suspenseful, and so I enjoyed this episode. I enjoyed it a lot. I thought it was an interesting character story for Ortegas, an interesting character story for Pike. Now, we also had this, storyline with Pike and Battelle, Captain Battelle, and I guess they're in a full-on relationship. Before I referred to them as friends with benefits, but I suppose they're actually in a relationship. This was never really made clear to me, but this episode heavily implies it, and I don't know. I never really liked her. There's something about her and their relationship that didn't really ring true to me. So I guess that aspect of the episode didn't really work for me. At the start of it, he says something to push her away because apparently she was going to get promoted to Commodore. I'm like, wow, that's pretty huge that she's getting promoted to Commodore. She seems a bit young, but I guess who am I to judge? But anyway... But her promotion failed because the Vulcan prosecutor guy is being a dick because she lost the case with Una. Why? Is she a prosecutor or is she a starship captain? I'm a bit confused, but whatever, what the plot requires, I guess. But anyway, so this whole storyline I'm kind of not really invested in, although I did think it was pretty cool that the gift he gave her she gave him is what helped him through his ordeal on the planet, helped him remember who he was. And also the storyline with the yeoman left behind does seem very reminiscent of the original series. And so I kind of like that. I thought that was kind of cool. So I thought this was an interesting episode. I don't think I wasn't blown away. I didn't think it was absolutely awesome, but definitely some good stuff. Had me on my edge of the seat, very suspenseful, and some good character stories with Pike and Ortegas in particular. So my rating for Among the Lotus Eaters out of 10 is going to be an 8. Extremely good. I think this is another strong Strange New Worlds episode, and overall love this show and can't wait to see what we see next. So that is it for my review of Among the Lotus Eaters for Strange New Worlds. I shall be back here next week to review another episode of Strange New Worlds, and hopefully next week I won't talk about this week's episode again. I think I wrapped it up this time. Anyway, be sure to check out my channel as I cover Strange New Worlds, also covering Star Trek The Next Generation, one episode at a time, and many other shows as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that, and thanks a lot for watching.